Welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed your meals, and more importantly, hope you've enjoyed the company. I'd like to thank and congratulate our winning cartoon bidders, although I think they may not know their winners yet, but I think the auction is now closing down, so you might have one more opportunity outside the ballroom. But a Reporters Committee staff member will be coming around to notify you if you're the winner. You can also check in at the auction table just outside the ballroom at any time from now through the end of the evening to process payments and collect your cartoons. We've got a terrific second half of the evening planned, and we're going to kick it off now with Reporters Committee Executive Director Bruce Brown.
Thank you, Lester. You've been such a gracious host, and we appreciate it very much. We thank all of our supporters and everyone who has made this tremendous success tonight possible. Now, I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea about the lifestyle in the nonprofit world. After all, those great cartoons out in the lobby were in the trunk of my Prius driving through New Jersey last night at 11 p.m. so we could save on the FedEx shipping and getting them up to New York. But working in the First Amendment is a little bit like those Patek Philippe wristwatch ads that remind you that you never really own one, you just look after it for the next generation. The honorees we are recognizing in this half of the program all demonstrate something very special about the First Amendment community and the way it looks after each other and the future of free speech and free press. Alberto, Eric, and Eve are the kind of colleagues who are there to offer a hand, respond in a crisis, and yes, they are always thinking about the next generation of journalists and lawyers and the strength of the First Amendment we will be handing off to them. They don't let us stay content with the law as it is, but force us to look ahead. We are very proud to be honoring them tonight for everything that they are doing to ensure that journalism completes its historical digital transformation under the masterful protection of the First Amendment. And speaking of the future, at the Reporters Committee, we're broadening the scope of our clients and the range of our work to meet new challenges, from nonprofit investigative journalism and documentary filmmaking to protecting the right to know from the right to be forgotten. Our move into litigation over the last 2 years, we're now representing journalists and news organizations pro bono in freedom of information and access cases, is already leading to notable victories. And a case that we bulldozed our way into to argue as amicus was just identified by Supreme Court nominee Merrick Garland as one of the 10 most important decisions that he has authored in his nearly 2 decades on the DC Circuit. I am grateful, after years of being the one writing RCFP's promotional copy, to have this plug coming straight from the bench. Our co-dinner chair, Lee Bollinger, has a special video message for you about the accomplishments of our honorees and about embracing the next generation of First Amendment litigation. Thank you very much.
I'm very honored to be co-chairing this event this evening for the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. This is a very important organization, and these are terrific honorees. I'm very sorry that I can't be with you tonight. There are very few things that would lead me to not attend. And those include my own graduation activities here at Columbia, over which I have to preside. Let me say about the First Amendment, about freedom of the press. I think we know 3 things. We know it's very, very recent. Only been in the past 50 years that what we take to be our great tradition and jurisprudence of freedom of the press is just that period of time. The second is that it's the most powerful protection of the press that exists any place in the world. And this is the result of many decades of work by institutions and individuals and organizations like the Reporters Committee. And the last thing I think we know about freedom of the press in the United States is that it's extremely fragile. It can be undone in a very short period of time. It is counterintuitive. It's not something that a society adopts automatically. It's something that you have to imagine and build and earn. The people who are being honored tonight are all friends, all people of enormous achievements. Burton, a graduate of Columbia, is of course in the field, really bringing greater intelligence and dedication to protecting freedom of the press. Alberto Ibargüen is one of the great figures of our time, both an editor and publisher, and a person as head of the Knight Foundation who has done more to advance through their gifts and projects and initiatives freedom of the press than I think any other such organization in the United States. Eric Newton, his partner in this, is as dogged and dedicated to preserving freedom of the press as anybody I know. And Tom Brokaw stands as really the icon of the great journalist, the great person, the great character who has brought us the news and himself set the standard for what we would want in a great free press society. It's also a great pleasure for me to join with Alberto Ibargüen and the Knight Foundation in announcing today the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University. We think this will add important litigation capacity and important scholarship and original thinking to defending and enhancing freedom of speech and press in the United States in the decades to come. I am really honored to be playing this role. I really admire the Reporters Committee on Freedom of the Press and all that they have done in serving to create this great tradition. And I really commend the honorees who are all people that we are privileged to know and to honor through this event. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Executive Editor of the Washington Post, Marty Baron.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce two individuals who have been both colleagues and friends. I can think of no more devoted advocates of free expression than Alberto Ibargüen and Eric Newton. Alberto has been the Knight Foundation's transformational leader for 11 years, embracing the exciting possibilities of technology and championing pioneers in our field. He put money behind the most innovative ideas. And as CEO, Alberto nurtured initiatives to prepare tomorrow's journalists for a new era. He has been a persistent, eloquent voice on behalf of the freedoms that allow us all to do our work. For decades, Alberto dedicated himself to building strong news organizations, everywhere in his role at the Knight Foundation and with extra intensity as a newspaper business executive in Hartford, New York, and Miami. As publisher at the Miami Herald, he did me the honor of making me its editor. I learned quickly that he likes vigorous debate, especially with his editor. So let's just say he availed himself of the right of free expression. There I also witnessed Alberto's passion for journalism that reveals truths and holds powerful interests to account. The Herald won 3 Pulitzer Prizes during his tenure. And with a vision beyond our borders, Alberto has sought to end impunity for those who kill, kidnap, and intimidate journalists. I recall Alberto speaking of his faith in the wisdom of a well-informed crowd. In another man's voice, those might be mere words. But Alberto is a doer. With every resource available to him, he has sought to assure that threats to free expression are extinguished and that the benefits of free expression are shared worldwide. Eric Newton has dedicated himself for years to advancing the cause of a free and vibrant press. Over 15 years in top positions at the Knight Foundation, he expanded its journalism and media innovation programs and helped develop $100 million in free expression grants. He assessed today's media landscape with hard-headed realism, pressing our profession to adopt new practices even as it fulfilled its public interest mission. Eric backed efforts that stand as enduring contributions to our field: the largest online journalism training portal in the world, a national observance of the importance of open government, a consortium that has transformed journalism education at universities, an innovation competition that funds breakthrough ideas. Previously, as managing editor of the Oakland Tribune, he helped guide the paper to a Pulitzer Prize. And even when the paper was broke, he found a way to sue agencies that refused to release information as required by law. As the first managing editor at the museum, he built the First Amendment into exhibits throughout the facility. And today, Eric is cultivating the next generation of journalists in his position as innovation chief at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, Arizona State University, while continuing to consult for the Knight Foundation. Together at the Knight Foundation, Alberto and Eric strengthened a relationship with the Reporters Committee that began in the 1970s. Decades later, the foundation provided an endowment that funds a substantial portion of the committee's work. Free expression imposes an obligation on every individual who hopes to enjoy its liberties. The Freedom of the Press Award goes to two individuals who made that obligation their life's work: Alberto Ibargüen and Eric Newton.
Thank you. We just wanted to show that we know how to do this. I'll speak for both of us if in the interest of time, and thank you, Marty. Back in Miami Herald days, I could easily have imagined you at the Washington Post and me at Knight Foundation. I'm not sure I would have imagined Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post or Knight Ridder disappearing where we worked. What I really couldn't have imagined is you inspiring an Academy Award movie or for that matter, that terrific imitation of Marty Baron playing Liev Schreiber, playing Marty Baron. Congratulations to you and the team at Spotlight, Boston Globe, for what you achieved for that community and for journalism. And thank you, Tim Armstrong and Lee Bollinger, who are the chairs of tonight's dinner and our friends and partners in too many important ways to count. I talked with Lee this afternoon, and it's true, he really does have a whole series of graduation events. Congratulations to Tom Brokaw for a lifetime in the First Amendment, and to my friend Eve Burton and the law department at Hearst. Under her leadership, Hearst has become indispensable in the daily fight for free speech and open records. I'm proud to say that, and prouder still that her First Amendment counsel is Susana's and my son, Diego Ibargüen. So congratulations to him as well. Eric and I thank the Reporters Committee for this honor, defending journalism and journalists especially journalists who ask uncomfortable questions and who write difficult truths, can be thankless, but it's a cause we all in this room believe in. And for more than 45 years, the Reporters Committee has fought for journalists and therefore for everyone's right to know. We are both proud that Knight Foundation has been among the committee's strongest supporters and expect the committee's Knight Litigation Fund to continue to be a permanent battlement from which to defend the First Amendment. Tom Brokaw put this evening in context, I think. We're living in a time of transition from media we have known to new media that is at once powerfully democratic and a tool for science fiction control. We accept this award at a moment when First Amendment law is far from settled. As our lives move into cyberspace, how will our freedoms move with them? As interpretations of the First Amendment evolve, who will fight for a broad definition of free expression in the tradition of American newspapers? Half of the leading newspaper editors responding to a recent poll said their industry was no longer prepared, no longer in a position to play its historic role of First Amendment defender. Companies that traditionally stood up for free press are stressed, and new media, internet companies, are apparently still trying to figure out whether this is their fight. We believe what Jack Knight wrote more than 40 years ago. We cannot free the minds of men if at the same time we accept limitations upon free speech or the right to express our opinions through the printed word or electronic media. The American press must resist with all the strength it can muster any governmental or other restrictive measures designed to negate or dilute our individual freedom. In that spirit, Knight Foundation and Columbia University today announced an agreement to partner, as Lee Bollinger mentioned in the video, to form the Knight Institute for the First Amendment at Columbia University. It is a $60 million commitment to free speech in the digital age, funded half by Columbia and half by Knight, intended to permanently support free speech while constantly evolving to stay relevant with the times and with technology. Lee Bollinger is a distinguished First Amendment scholar, and under his leadership, Columbia brings unique abilities to unite world-class law, journalism, and engineering, making it the ideal partner. Challenges to free expression are plentiful as the daily news, from political promises to toughen libel laws, to a presidential administration that has widened surveillance powers and denied record numbers of Freedom of Information Act requests. But the challenges go beyond that and are made global by the very technologies that increasingly determine the news we see and don't see, what we know and think we know, and governmental action, both here and abroad, trying in earnest to penetrate and control that technology, whether with right-to-be-forgotten laws or other straight-out censorship. In a World Wide Web world, those laws will impact us. So we believe it's crucial that another financially independent, institutionally powerful advocate stand up to maintain the gold standard of free expression. The Knight Institute at Columbia will champion free expression through domestic litigation, research, scholarship, with the goal of producing significant legal victories and informing discourse, debate, and understanding of free speech. The Institute's board will include the deans of the law school and the journalism school. Steve Cole, the dean of the journalism school, is here tonight, as well as our co-honoree, Eve Burton. We are well into the search for an executive director who will report directly to President Bollinger, and I am delighted to announce that Ford, Hewlett, and Carnegie Foundations have already agreed to support the Institute, so the family that you've created continues to grow. Eric and I are not the type to wring our hands and lament that the world has changed or that power seeks greater and greater control of information. Power and change has always been. We accept that challenge, but the truth is that we don't yet fully understand the implications of our lives in internet or know the way future generations will interpret free expression. So our vision is that the Knight Institute, devoted to principle and able to evolve with technology, will effectively advocate in favor of the right to know and the right to tell, for freedom in a future we can't yet imagine, and against the relentless enemies of free expression. We stand for free speech, free press, and for a free people. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Fainaru-Wada of ESPN and Lance Williams of the Center for Investigative Reporting.
I might have to move over here. You want to switch sides? No, I just mean I'm here. All right. Well, you have no idea what a thrill it is for us to be able to introduce Eve Burton, be part of celebrating her career commitment to press freedom. We had, as Lance and I got here tonight, we had a chance to see a lot of the old Hearst folks who we spent a lot of time with, and folks from the Reporters Committee who thanked us for being here. And our response was the same, like, what are you talking about? We're so grateful to be here. We're the ones who are lucky to be able to have this moment to introduce Eve. And of course, if any of you know Eve, you also know that you can't possibly say no to Eve. So, like, whether we wanted to be here or not, we were going to be here. Lance and I experienced firsthand the true force of nature that Eve is. She changed and shaped our lives in ways we're never going to be able to forget, and really never be able to repay. Of course, she's been championing the press for decades. When Eve became general counsel at the New York Daily News in the mid-'90s, management made the radical and not entirely popular move of placing her in the newsroom. Reporters and editors, some of them fretted that Eve would be an obstacle to their work, and instead she was a potent resource, pushing forward investigations, fighting for public records and increased media access, getting family court open to the media, as she told me earlier tonight, perhaps her most proud moment around First Amendment. She sued the city of New York and Mayor Giuliani 20 times at least. I read a quote from Joe Calderon, who was the chief of investigations at the Daily News, who said something to the effect of, previously, any time a lawyer had been in the newsroom, he would be running the other way or hoping they weren't coming towards him. Eve was the first and only lawyer he looked forward to seeing. When it was announced that Eve was leaving the Daily News for CNN, the special counsel for Mayor Giuliani said, "Let's just say I'm very thrilled CNN is located in Atlanta." Nowhere, though, has Eve's zealous defense of the First Amendment been more evident than in the battle that she waged on our behalf. At the San Francisco Chronicle, we were covering a federal grand jury probe into the use of illegal performance-enhancing drugs by some of the world's greatest athletes. In 2004, the Chronicle published a series of stories based on the testimony of those athletes, stories that laid bare the pervasiveness of steroids in sports and prompted a national public health discussion about their dangers. Our work was almost universally celebrated. We were even commended for performing a service by then-President George W. Bush, a huge baseball fan and once the part owner of the Texas Rangers. Yet in the spring of 2006, Bush's own Attorney General, Alberto Gonzales, approved subpoenas that demanded we reveal the source of our stories. These subpoenas threatened to put us in prison for 18 months if we didn't comply. Of course, we had no intention of complying, but make no mistake, we were worried. Enter Eve.
You know, there really isn't any protection for reporters and whistleblowers when you get over to federal court. We so need a federal shield law, and until we get them, if you find yourself in that situation, you face long odds. That's what Eve was up against after she agreed to take Mark and me as her clients in the case. For the next 8 months, she worked day and night to protect the First Amendment values that were at issue in our case, and not incidentally, to get us reporters out of the jam we found ourselves in. Now, we know she worked those long hours because Eve is into client contact. She would phone us at all hours to tell us the latest, the thinking behind the legal briefs and strategies of John Donnellan and the legal team, the scope and intensity of the congressional lobbying effort, the case's politics and personalities, and always her latest great idea, the newest angle she was working in hopes of getting us out of the trouble we were in, of allowing us to keep our promises to our sources and yet avoid federal prison. And in the end, she prevailed. Really, through great enterprise and tremendous force of will, she made the government do what they're always supposed to do in source cases, but never do. Do your own investigation of your security and secrecy concerns. Don't just squeeze the reporters. But she made them do it, and so the day came when the government announced that through their own means they had identified a source of our stories, and the prosecutors said they really didn't need our testimony anymore, so they were going to drop the subpoenas, and then the judge vacated the prison sentences, and we were free because of Eve Burton. So now, Mark and I always say to reporters, if you ever get jammed up, dragged into a source case, have somebody reach out to Eve Burton at Hearst. She has a million ideas. She is a reporter's truest friend, and it is great to be able to publicly say how much we thank you, your efforts on behalf of us and of all reporters every place. Thanks so much, Eve. Now we have a video from Mr. Frank Bennick of Hearst.
Good evening. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you tonight, but I hope you'll indulge me for a few minutes anyway, because I have something important to say. They say that behind every good reporter is a good editor. It's usually the editors who say that, to tell the truth. I know a few reporters who might beg to differ. Anyway, I think it's true. But here's something you don't hear as often. Behind every good editor, there's a good lawyer. And I think that's more than true. And you know what? We are lucky to have one of the very best. Eve Burton came to Hearst by way of CNN. From the very start, she always said that her team's goal was to support the greater good of our company. But she also made it clear that achieving that greater good meant standing for something more, something beyond Hearst. That's a free press. And that free speech itself is the bedrock on which you build a democratic society. We have some very brave reporters in this room tonight, and some very brave editors. But let's take a moment to thank a woman who allows us to be brave by giving us the power, the weaponry, the strategy, and above all, the legal and moral standing to fight the good fight. So who is Eve Burton? Let me tell you. In one of the country's most publicized cases in professional sports, when Mark and Lance broke the Balco steroid scandal in 2004, Eve and her team fought fearlessly to protect their sources as they faced a federal subpoena and 18 months in jail for contempt. The order was later dropped. In the case of Capital Newspapers versus Bruno and Silver, when New York's elected officials were secretly spending millions of taxpayer dollars on pet projects, the Albany Times Union sued to get the truth and won. That was Eve and her team. And when Esquire magazine published a blog that satirized one of those birther books about President Obama, the book's author sued and lost. The winner was Esquire. But the real winner was the concept of satire itself. That was Eve and her team. We're all grateful for Eve because in the end, we are all better at what we do because she is so good at what she does for all of us. Not just those of us at Hearst, but all of us who labor at the honorable task of shining light into dark places. So thank you all for giving me a few minutes of your time. In closing, I'd like to add my congratulations to the incomparable Tom Brokaw and the brilliant team from the Knight Foundation, Alberto and Eric. And Eve, thank you. Keep up the good work and keep telling the truth.
Ladies and gentlemen, Eve Burton.
Well, we're not going to do Balco again, right? We're not going to do Balco again. Thank you, Mark and Lance, and thank you, Reporters Committee, for what you do for journalists every single day. And thank you, Tim Armstrong and Lee Bollinger, for being the chairs of this dinner, and to Alberto and Eric and Tom. I want you to know what a privilege it is for this First Amendment lawyer and her team to be honored in your company. As Lance and Mark made clear, the First Amendment is a team sport. So I've brought my team. It's a team I've played with for many years, and you guys are the true champions of the First Amendment. It doesn't happen alone. As everyone knows, even those who practice corporate law at Hearst, a criteria for being hired in the Office of General Counsel is a devotion to the amendment. So I'd like to ask my team to please stand so I can thank them. Love that, Frank Bennick. I wanted to start with a Balco story, and it, in fact, involved Frank Bennick. In our darkest days, after Lance and Mark were sentenced to 18 months in jail, and we'd appealed and had kept them out of jail pending that appeal, the government came to Hearst in a very dark day and told us that if the company did not produce the confidential information, which they understood we had, we would be held in contempt as a company. The cost of the contempt was $180 million based on grand jury rules. Frank, at that point, was our executive chairman and well known to many in this room, the giant he is. And he supported us to keep pushing, even in the light of this fine. He said, and I quote, "This is the risk we take as part of being a great media company." Steve Schwartz, our present CEO, would have said the same thing. One was a publisher, the other was a journalist. They understood the playing field extremely well. And by affirming these first principles for us, our team was free to power on. And this, along with Lance and Mark, staying together and staying with us, allowed us all to win. As I said, the First Amendment is a team sport. The First Amendment is also like a muscle. It has to be exercised. As Lee Bollinger said, the First Amendment exists only in theory without a constituency of support. And every single one of you here, whether you're a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, a Cub reporter, a lawyer, those who've argued some of the most important Supreme Court cases under the First Amendment, and the executives who have supported the mission, which is expensive, have all been part of protecting free speech. Even some in the government have been constituents. Our present Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, surprising to some of you, has long been someone who does appreciate the First Amendment. She and I have found ourselves with common ground in very difficult circumstances over the years. So take some heart, hopefully. People in that position sometimes change their views when they get there, but she has the right instincts. At Hearst, we have a dedicated commitment to keeping the doors of government open and information flowing to our readers and our viewers. Our newspapers and our mobile websites now reach 80 million readers daily. Our television stations reach about 20% of all Americans. Our magazines reach 58% of the US population and millions more globally. Team Hearst's efforts on behalf of the amendment is often not sexy. It doesn't get reported, but it is important and enduring. In the last 18 months, for example, our First Amendment lawyers at Hearst have fielded nearly 300 separate access to information requests from our television and newspaper newsrooms across the country. The breadth of these requests and reporting scope is staggering. It's still alive and well. From police departments that refuse to give out use of force data, to military officials who resist every attempt to bring transparency to their court proceedings, to courts that block the docket from public view, and to government agencies that shield all aspects of the work they perform in the name of the public. Our journalists send us roughly 4 new requests a week, and I'm honored to say, and with great thanks, that many of those journalists are here tonight, having traveled very far to be with us, and I thank them. Let's look to the future. The First Amendment has a number of great challenges, as Alberto has outlined, but let's touch on 2. First, there are new players in the ecosystem. Our West Coast colleagues at Google, Microsoft, and Apple, who I thank for being here tonight. I think that's noteworthy in and of itself. The world is changing, as well as AOL here in New York, as Tim said, are not immune from the difficulties in balancing civil liberties under the First Amendment, from the pressures as recent history has shown. Our technology colleagues did not grow up in the same puddles as we did. We learned what it meant to be wet and sinking in that water. We won cases. We developed the law. They've not grown up with that same history and the cost of hard-won cases. We need to have a cultural mesh so that the country can speak the same language when it comes to the First Amendment. Second, our great First Amendment bar and journalists once had a social contract with the government, in which I mean there was a cushion of tolerance between the executive branch and the press that allowed for conversations on difficult topics. We all had rights that we never used out of respect and restraint. The government did not prosecute always or push for full disclosure. The press would give a second thought to publishing when asked in rare times where security or safety were critical. That room to maneuver is now gone. So we need to pivot. We need to find new answers and new thinking. The traditional media companies of the East and the new media companies of the West, and they are media companies, or said differently, culture and code need to work together on new standards, a new social contract, and a new respect for the strengths that each of us bring and need to bring to the protection of the First Amendment in the coming century. But meanwhile, tonight, let's celebrate the latest force for good by supporting the Columbia University Knight Institute that will give the world access to the 99% of the government information that we know we are all entitled to. We mostly fight about the 1%. So let's celebrate the 99%, whether it's bringing sunshine to the family courts, as the Daily News did, or uncovering corruption in sports, as Mark and Lance did so brilliantly, or opening up Gore versus Bush, as CNN did. The Knight Institute and the Reporters Committee will champion the next chapter that will keep the constitutional muscle toned and ready for the next challenge. That is critical. That's the 99%. And a final note, if I may, of gratitude to those who've joined me on my First Amendment journey. As you all know, I'm not easy. To Karen, affectionately known to everyone at Hearst as the boss. And to my family, which gives new meaning to being part of a tribe, to Kat and Ed and her 15 brothers from another mother, as well as her brother Kyle from that same mother, me. Thank you all for getting dressed, wearing a tie, and getting here on time tonight. That's the most amazing thing that's happened tonight. And most importantly, to my husband, John. A Shakespeare scholar, you may not know, a teacher of English in the South Bronx, where access has another meaning, and there is really something for our country to worry about, and that is true poverty, and less of a way out to a different life. John, thanks for being my bestie. Good night.
Eve, congratulations, and congratulations to all of the honorees this evening. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight to honor these outstanding individuals and to support the work of the Reporters Committee. If you are a winning bidder for a cartoon, please be sure to check out at the auction table just outside the ballroom. It just seems so funny making those kind of announcements. I don't know why. But thank you. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Thanks for being here.